The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. We're about to get started with the webinar in a minute or so. Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join our webinar today on the ultimate guide to selecting an embedded analytics product. The webinar today will be conducted by Wayne Eckerson, the founder and principal consultant for Eckerson Group, and myself, Ashwindan Nagendran, on behalf of Dundas. Now, throughout the demo, feel free to ask as many questions as you want through the GoToWebinar questions panel, and we'll be taking them through the webinar today. Eckerson has collaborated with Dundas in the past on many occasions discussing data visualizations and BI solutions. He has been a thought leader in the business intelligence and analytics field since the early 1990s and is a sought-after consultant, a noted speaker, and an expert educator who thinks critically, writes clearly, and presents persuasively about complex topics. Eckerson has conducted many groundbreaking research studies, chaired numerous conferences, written 2 widely read books on performance dashboards and analytics, as well as consulted on BI, analytics, and data management topics for numerous organizations. Wayne, thank you for joining us today, and hello to you.
Hi, Ash. It's great to be here once again with Dundas and its audience.
Now, our agenda for today can be split into 2 major parts. How we select embedding analytics products, which will be presented by Wayne, followed by a demo on the embedding capabilities of Dundas BI, and then we'll be taking a lot more questions towards the end of our webinar session as well. Now, with that said, Wayne, over to you on how to select an embedding analytics product.
Great. Okay. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Excuse me. Been looking into embedded analytics for a couple of years now, just so that we're all on the same page. Embedded analytics means that you're embedding some form of analytics into another application. It could be a chart, it could be a table, it could be a dashboard, it could be the entire analytical tool that would give you self-service capabilities. So just so we all know what that means, this webcast, at least my portion, is going to focus on how to select a product for embedding, a commercial product for embedding into your application. first, we should probably say, why would you want to do this? And it's a good question. I've been covering BI and analytics for almost 25 years now, and what I'm seeing is that there's still a fairly low penetration rate. Around 20 to 30% of employees actually use analytical tools inside organizations. And that's clearly not where we want to be. We think the value of data and the ability to analyze that data, if embraced pervasively throughout an organization, can transform organizations, making them more nimble, adapt, etc. So in my opinion, embedded analytics really is the last mile of BI. It has the potential for increasing penetration rates up to 100%. It really, in that regard, is the future of business intelligence. It's what will make BI pervasive. So why would you want to embed analytics? We've already essentially discussed the big one, which is to increase penetration. But also, the reason why it will do that is because you're integrating analytics into the very processes that people are managing on a day-to-day basis, and the systems that they use to manage those processes. As such, there's no context switching between analytics and their source or systems applications. They don't have to get out of their core application, whether it's Salesforce or an order management system, and go to their dashboard. Everything's blended into one. As a result, there's greater adoption. In fact, people may not even know they're using BI or analytics because it's just part of their core application. And if you're a commercial vendor of software, it's going to increase the value of your product, and perhaps even if you charge for it, generate some additional revenue. Because, of course, there's no silver bullet out there. There are challenges with embedded analytics, as in any new technology. The first really is whether you're going to build or buy the embedded analytics capability. This webinar assumes that you're going to buy, and in fact, that's the trend we're seeing out there in the industry. A lot of companies start by building because they have extra resources on their development staff. But unless you have a very simple environment with just a handful of very static reports and requirements will never change, then you're probably going to be better off buying. But if you do build, the big issue will be, can you keep up with demand? Because what we always see is that users come in with new requests for reports and functionality. If you buy, it's really about selecting the right product and the right vendor partner, which is the whole purpose of this webcast. The other challenge, the big challenge really, is integrating with the host application. And BI products, analytics products really vary in the ease of use and the richness with which you can do that. And finally, the big challenge is, once you've delivered something and embedded analytics into your application, getting users to adopt that. That's key. So how do we select an embedded analytics product? Well, not unlike any other product. We have a simple methodology. First, we need to do some planning, plan out what we really want. Then we need to do some research and evaluation and select a product. Then we need to deploy it, and then finally sustain it. Now, this applies to whether you're a commercial organization that is selling software or services of some kind to customers, or you're an enterprise, such as a trucking organization or a manufacturing company that wants to deliver analytics embedded in core applications to your employees. And we'll point out where there's a difference in this process, depending on whether you're a commercial or organization or an enterprise one. So let's talk about planning the project. There's a couple of key things that you need to do here. The first really is you have to know what you're doing and why you're doing it, and that's the strategy. So what are your core goals in embedding analytics? Are you trying, if you're a commercial organization, trying to catch the competition? Or are you just trying to make your existing external product more engaging for customers? Or do you see this as a way to get a competitive advantage? Other important things, as we already said, is, are you going to build or buy? It's also really important from a strategic perspective to understand who you're targeting. Who are the target customers? Is this going to benefit all of your customers or some of your customers? And if it's just some of your customers, who are the target users inside those customers? Also, are you going to offer embedded analytics as an add-on to your product, an optional add-on, or is it going to come integrated with everything that you offer to your employees or customers? Are you going to charge for it if you're a commercial organization, or provide it for free? Are you going to accept customer requests to customize the environment once it's deployed? And finally, how are you going to roll out this embedded analytics product? So those are all key parts of the strategy that are really important. It's also important to time boxes, establish a time frame for doing the initial research, creating a short list of vendors, doing your proof of concept, selecting the vendor, then doing the development, and finally, releasing this to the market. So a well-crafted timeline is really important to ensure you stay on track, and a good vendor partner will help you establish realistic expectations here. It's also important to assemble the team. Obviously, we need the product manager and the product developers who will be working to actually embed the product in analytics into the host application. But there's obviously going to be other folks involved. Typically, an executive is going to make the decision to do this embedding, especially on the commercial side. But there are also other key stakeholders in sales and marketing and legal and your web development, your training and education team, your support team, especially in a commercial environment. All those folks really need to be brought into the planning stage of the project up front. There even might be some external folks, key customers, a customer advisory board that you may want to get involved. And then finally, and probably most importantly, you need to define your user requirements. And this follows from who your target customers and users are. And what we really recommend to ensure high levels of adoption of what you put out there is that you focus in on a handful of personas, maybe 2 or 3, and really delve into who they are, what they're responsible for in the organization, what their key workflows are in getting their job done, and in that workflow, what are the information pain points they experience. And you really should map this out, and then from that, identify different types of visualizations that can, with data that can support those or address those pain points that you've identified in their workflows. That really is the key to adoption. Another thing that you probably need to define up front is the type of embedding, and there's 3 types that I've discovered. One I call detached analytics. This is where the analytics actually is external to the application, so you could argue whether this is even embedding or not. But we see this a lot, especially in an environment where there are multiple applications and they all leverage the same analytics portal. And through some automated linking, they will share data with the analytics in the portal. It's also appropriate when it's a third party doing the analytics, such as Google Analytics for your website traffic. And typically the integration here is through a URL. A more common form of embedding is what we call inline analytics, where here the analytics is actually embedded into the host application, typically as a separate page or separate tab inside the application. Besides sharing data and security information through a single sign-on capability, the analytics now adopt the look and feel of the host application, something we call white labeling. And often this is done through iframes technology, very common way to embed content, and the styling is done through cascading style sheets. The final and perhaps the most valuable form of embedding, and one that's growing in popularity, is what we call fused analytics. This is where the analytics sits side by side on the same page with the components of the host application. So you can really here show performance and context, make analytics part of the workflow, and both the host application and the analytics can really update each other. So You might use the host application to navigate to certain parts of the analytic environment, and then vice versa. The analytics might be able to update the host application, submit an order, update a product, correct an error in the data. And this type of integration is usually achieved through JavaScript and REST APIs. The second part of the process is to select a product, and we've already talked a little bit about this. The first thing you really need to do after you analyze your user requirements is identify criteria that you need in a product to support the kind of embedding that you want for the types of users you need to support. At Eckerson Group, we're working on a report right now on selecting an embedded analytics product, which is why Dundas has us speaking here today. And we've created 9, probably in the end 10 categories of criteria that you should look at for evaluating embedded analytics products. And once we publish this report sometime this winter, we'll also provide a spreadsheet that will make it very easy for you to compare products side by side, weight them and score them, and see which turns out to be most suited to your requirements. And in just a second, I'll go through these criteria. But once you identify the criteria, create a short list of vendors, conduct proof of concepts, talk to their references, and then finally select a product. So key things to consider. We're going to drill down on these evaluation criteria for embedding analytics. The first thing you really need to look at is what can you embed? Not all analytics products allow you to embed everything. Most of them will let you embed output, but how many of them let you embed the authoring environment as well as the administration environment and the data modeling environment? That's key to understand, especially if you want to support self-service analytics in an embedded environment. Then how is it embedded? Through iframe, through JavaScript, through REST, through a combination of these things. And where can it be embedded? In the web, in your desktop application, in a mobile application, packaged application like Salesforce, or other common packages like that. Does the vendor offer some kind of a template in those situations that really make it easy to bolt analytics into those very common applications used in many organizations? Second, customization. How easy is it to customize the user interface and style the analytics to make it look and feel just like the host application? Most products say they can do this, but how they do it really varies. So drill in, find out how much of it can be done through point and click, how much of it has to be done in the CSS files, which will require someone with more development expertise to do, or if they have something in between, a configuration file that you can use to style and configure the CSS without coding. Then you need to ask, can you extend the product? Usually there's really no product out there that's going to meet all of your needs out of the box, so you probably need to extend it. Add a new type of visualization or a new connector to a different data source. Change the layout. Add or modify objects and controls in the analytics application. Modify or add scheduling and other types of utilities. And then how would you do that? Can you bring in third-party projects like D3 visualization objects? Do you have to write custom code to do this extension? Or does the tool offer a plugin framework or an SDK to do this? And then finally, once you extend the product, are those upgradable? So when the product upgrades to the next release, does that blow away everything you've extended in it or not? Process integration, very key, especially for the fused analytics scenario. Can the application and the BI tool communicate bidirectionally? That's not always true with the iframes, for instance, which kind of create a separate window inside of a web page. So explore that. Also, API calls, webhooks, SQL updates, scripting and coding. These are all ways that the two applications can interact with each other in real time. Some are easier than others, and some tools don't support any of this, so be careful. How open is the tool? Can other apps or services query the BI tool to get at the data that it's compiled from the host application or other sources besides the host? How robust and well documented is the API? That is key if you're going to do any kind of customization and extensibility. Important to look at the data architecture. First and foremost, what data sources does the product support? Ideally, it supports, or it's going to have to support the data that the host application collects and manages, but you may also want to combine the host data with other data. So, what's the level of SQL it supports? Does it support NoSQL databases, files, OLAP cubes, et cetera, et cetera? And what kind of generic connectors like ODBC, JDBC does it support? Also, does the tool query databases and data sources directly, or does it require you to cache the data, store it in memory or on disk, and then query it from there? Or does it let you do both? There will be situations where you want to query the host application data directly, but if that's going to bog down the host, then you probably want to cache and store it and query it from there. What kind of data transformations does it support? And does it work in both of those scenarios I just described, direct query or cache and query? From a systems architecture, you need to know what the footprint of the BI tool is. Is it heavyweight or is it lightweight? What kind of operating system does it require and run on? What are its RAM requirements? What language was it written in? What hardware does it require? Also, are there any dependencies? Does it require a desktop tool to do authoring? That will eliminate the ability for you to offer self-service analytics inside of your tool, your host application. Does it require its own database, or is that optional? Does it require its own application server, or is that optional? And then, what kind of server does it require? Does it require its own security system, or can it use the security from the host system, or can it do either, depending on your requirements? Does it require a semantic layer for users to query the data? That's additional development that has to be done. And for mobile usage, do users have to download an app from an app store to leverage the mobile analytics capabilities? That might not be something that you want users to have to do in an embedded environment. Multi-tenancy is very important, especially in a commercial environment for SaaS vendors, software as a service vendors. For instance, you might want to ask, do changes at the host propagate to each tenant in a multi-tenant environment? So you can change once and have everything updated downstream without having to do updates for every tenant separately. That would be way too burdensome. Can tenants receive different versions of the same content without duplication? That's kind of the same thing. Is there a central console for managing, upgrading all tenants and users? Very important. You don't want to have to be doing each tenant separately. Can each tenant administer its own environment? Apply selective permissioning so users get to use only the functions that they really need and want, see only the reports and data that they need and want. Can each tenant have its own database, or can it share a database with other tenants? And does the tool provide sufficient security to make sure one tenant doesn't see another tenant's data? Security, very important. We've touched on this a little bit. Does the BI tool use its own security, or can it leverage the host application security, or do both, or either? Does the tool security, if that's required, need to be synchronized with the host? That can be burdensome if that's the case. Can the BI tool control access to individual objects based on host security? What security models does it support? LDAP, Active Directory, and custom types of security models? Does the tool support multiple pricing tiers if you're a commercial organization? And if so, how would you promote a user from one tier to the next, or demote them if they wanted to get out of the higher price tier, for instance? Administration, how are product changes synced with the host? Is there version control, audits, DevOps, Host application developers would love to have the analytics essentially be an extension of their own tool, not something that's separately managed. Is there a console to manage errors, timeouts, and other activity on the analytics tool? And how is that integrated with the host console? How would you manage load balancing, backup, restore, clustering, cloud provision of the analytics tool? Is that even possible? And again, how is that integrated with the host systems management capabilities? Localization, this is a big one. Does the tool support multiple languages, currency, symbols, date formats, icons based on where it's being deployed? Vendor, look at the vendor. They're going to be your partner in this journey. Do they offer value-based pricing when usage can't be predicted, which it usually can't, especially in a commercial setting? What services and support does the vendor offer to accelerate onboarding? What percentage of the vendor's business is done with ISVs and OEMs? That's a good indication that it's a specialist in this space and knows what it's doing. And then finally, the thing that most people look at first when they evaluate BI or analytics tools is, well, what functionality does it support from an analytics perspective? And a lot of that can be, at least the strengths in that area can be found if you understand where the tool's heritage is. How did it start out life? That's usually where it's best. And make sure that maps to what you want to do most with the tool. Certainly the trend these days is that any analytics product is going to, out of the box, provide some degree of support for any type of analytic functionality you want, from reporting to dashboarding to self-service to visual exploration to advanced analytics. But every tool does better in some of those areas than others. So understanding its heritage gives you a good sense of where it's strong and where it's not. So those are some of the key things to consider. Again, we're doing research on this area and should have a report out in Q1 of next year. So once you've selected a product, you need to deploy it. It's important to understand packaging and pricing, especially in a commercial environment. From a packaging perspective, there's three options, and we've kind of alluded to these. One, you can embed the analytics product for free, and that's going to certainly make your existing product more valuable and useful to users, and maybe increase user satisfaction and retention, which ultimately will make your product more valuable and maybe generate more revenue for you in the end. Or you could bolt analytics on to the package as an add-on and upsell users to that new add-on and then directly generate revenue from the addition of analytics. And the final packaging option is a tiered one where you spread analytics functionality across 2 or 3 pricing tiers or packaging tiers. For instance, the base tier might come with standard reports. A second tier might come with self-service capabilities and additional data. And a more advanced tier might come with more data and, say, benchmarking capabilities, the ability to benchmark your capabilities performance in the area that this host application focuses on versus other customers of this product.
Hi, everyone. Looks like we have a bit of audio difficulties there. We'll give Wayne a second or a minute or two to get back to us.
But probably a little bit below the overall value that it provides to customers. And then you also have to take into consideration what your competitors are charging for comparable capabilities, especially in a commercial setting. Okay, Ash, I just saw a message that our connection got restored. Is everything okay?
Yeah, Wayne, we can hear you fine now.
Oh, so there was an issue?
Yeah,
Sorry.
there was a moment there where it was just the slides, but no audio.
Oh, okay. I didn't notice until just now. I was looking at my notes, but in any case, we just covered packaging and pricing. Very important on a commercial side of things. Uh, Once you decide that, then you need to decide your rollout strategy, which you might want to beta these new features to a set of key customers or people who volunteer to be part of a beta program. And then finally, you'll want to roll it out, and maybe not all at once. Maybe start small in a specific region or with a specific customer segment, and make sure you have a rollback strategy in case things don't work out as planned. You also have to define your sales and marketing strategy. You have to train your salespeople on the new product functionality, help them understand who the target audience is. Your marketing team is going to need to generate awareness for these new capabilities, both inside the product, on your website, and through advertising. You'll need to provide education and training for how users can make the best use of these new features. That can be through videos and webcasts, or even in-product capabilities like chat and help. You need to help administrators at the customers understand how to better make use of these capabilities for their end users through documentation and user forums. Finally, support. You need to decide who's going to provide support, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Is it your team exclusively, or are you going to rely on the vendor for some of those tiers, perhaps tier 3? Ultimately, when you define a go-to-market strategy, especially in a commercial setting, you need to think like a product manager. And it's really important in this case to make sure you have that team assembled, sales, marketing, legal, support, up front, so they know what's going to happen and don't throw any kinks into the process at the last moment. Finally, once you've deployed the product, then you need to sustain it, which means monitoring traffic and activity, make sure you've got suitable levels of adoption, continually enhance and improve the analytic product. There's a natural tendency for users to jump right on it and experiment with it. If it's not designed properly, if you haven't done the heavy lifting of identifying the personas and the workflows and really targeting the output of the analytics to the user base that you're targeting, adoption may trail off. So just because you have initial surge of interest and usage doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. So make sure you monitor continuously and get feedback from users, from the sales team, from the forums, and continuously enhance this product to make sure it's going to meet the goals that you set forth right at the beginning. So, in summary, I think if I was to boil all this down, what are the key success factors for embedded analytics and selecting a product? One, know your strategy. Know what you want to accomplish. So in the end, you know if you're successful or not. And really a key part of that is assemble the team up front to make sure that you've got all points of view being considered so that when you finally get ready to deploy, everyone's on board and it will be a smooth rollout. Secondly, know your users. Make sure that what you actually deploy in terms of charts and visualizations and dashboards are going to meet their needs at a deep level. Make sure you identify your requirements from what you gather from users and then map those to technical capabilities of the products. Select the right product as a result, and make sure you have a vendor you can partner with who's committed to your success. And then create a reasonable, practical, and logical rollout plan to ensure your success. So with that, I will turn this back over to Ash to show you one example of an embedded analytics product and what you can do with it.
All right. Thank you very much for that informative presentation on embedding analytics and selecting our product. I'd like to showcase some of Dundas BI's capabilities on that embedded analytics. So we're going to walk through a few examples and samples to kind of talk based on some of the points that was presented by Wayne. Now, as an end-to-end BI solution, Dundas is designed to cover all of your needs in a single platform that sits on top of your data source, which includes data preparation, the analytics, presentation, collaboration, as well as governance, all within a single extensible platform built entirely on open APIs. Now, embedding Dundas BI into other applications is a common use case for Dundas BI, as it's the best in class when it comes to multi-tenancy and other key requirements for this kind of solution. So Dundas BI provides you with the ability to not only embed predefined content, but also to include self-serve capabilities, admin capabilities within a tenant, all as part of your embedded solution. And you also have the entire application that is based on open APIs. So for any kind of additional customization that you're looking for, we'll certainly be able to meet all of these different key requirements. So during today's product demonstration, allow me to focus specifically on the embedding analytics part of Dundas BI. So let me go ahead and pull up my browser at this point, and hopefully everybody can see the screen clearly there. Now, the interesting thing about the set of examples that we're going to sort of walk through that, can be broken down into the embedding portion. How do we take the embedded analytics and quickly scale it out with the aid of multi-tenancy, as well as how do we customize and look at the extensibility options. So this slide deck that you're looking at was actually built in Dundas BI. So this is just another example of how we can further customize our application to pretty much any of your needs. So for the first part, we're going to start a little bit simple and basic. We're going to take a look at an example of how do we embed, say, a dashboard or report that you might build using our embedding library. So I've opened up a new tab here, and you can see that in this code section on the left-hand side, there is a simple script that calls our embedded library, passes a couple of parameters to that library, such as where is the source of my BI solution coming from, what is the ID of the content that I would like to load. So with a fairly simple amount of scripting, short level of scripting here, I'm able to embed a dashboard into an iframe view as we can see over here on the right hand side. Now with this, it's just a very basic, simple example of how you can quickly embed a dashboard or report that you're building into a page. However, if you take a look at the second example here, this is an article that I've pulled up from the support site of Dundas BI, and you can see that it documents extensively a lot of the other different options that's available as part of our embedding library. So allowing your application and Dundas BI to communicate back and forth, some of the parameterized options that you can use, hooks to communicate between your application and Dundas BI is well documented here, so that as a developer, as you're going in and looking for some of the different integration options, you can easily find the documented information and move on with the embedding. Now, up next, we'd like to look at a bit more of a involved use case on how you can embed your analytics into your product or say your portal. Now this particular view here gives us a split screen view where I can not only present predefined content. So on the left hand side here, I see a list of dashboards that I can click on them to say navigate to predefined content or dashboards that have been made available for me, such as these click interactions. Or I can also embed a self-serve capability for my end users on a dashboard. So on the right-hand side here, you can see that if I go ahead and select from one of my data sources that I might want to work with, say a sample data set, I can say create a data set, which, let's go ahead and click that. Apparently it's not allowing me to do that. Okay, let me try that one more time. That might be an ad blocker. Okay, let me switch my windows here for a second. All right, there we go. So with the sample data set selected, I can say, let me go ahead and try to create a data set from here, which then I am navigated to the metric set designer in Dundas. So for a user who wants to do a bit more self-serve other than being presented with a predefined set of dashboards and reports, they can use this metric set designer to perhaps analyze the data or slice and dice it. So for example, here they can pull one of the groupings that they want to quickly build out a line chart. And you can see as part of this self-serve capability via the toolbar at the top, they can further analyze the data, create formulas on them instead of just being limited to, let's say, a predefined set of content that is available as part of their embedded analytics. Now, once you create a set of dashboards or reports for your users, how do we take this content and very quickly scale it out to, say, a customer base, or use multi-tenancy to have a set of dashboards and reports target a variety of different users? Now, this is typically a use case scenario that SaaS-based providers encounter a lot. So we have a series of examples to kind of show you how this can be achieved within our application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a view of a tenant which has been set up to use the multi-tenancy module in Dundas. So let's go ahead and log in as tenant number 1. And basically what you're seeing at this point is a dashboard that loads up that shows us some information related to sales deposit and the risk overview that we might be getting from checks that we're cashing in as part of sales. So you can see here that you have a dashboard that is styled towards a particular company here called Adventure Works. We see some information based on specific locations, different client names, but I can also take this dashboard, let's say as I'm viewing it, and choose to share this perhaps with other users that are part of my tenant or part of my company. So here I can see a list of users where I can grant or share access for this dashboards together with them. Now, if we wanted to take the same dashboard, repackage it, and provide it to, say, a secondary tenant, another company, in this case, this tenant that we're about to log in as, so tenant number 2 is a bicycle company, so Picard Bicycles. And when this tenant logs in, you can see there's quite a bit of a difference compared to tenant number 1, where the dashboard is obviously styled differently based on the color schemes of this bicycle company. But not only that, I'm also able to start introducing data security, where the location of the analysis or the store locations, the list of clients that I'm cashing my check from to see if there's a risk of fraud, for example, is localized to the specific tenant or the specific client that has access to this dashboard. And you'll see here that if this particular tenant tries to, let's say, share the dashboard or report that they're looking at, even the list of users that they have access to is localized specifically to the people that belong within the tenant. So we're providing that segregation or sort of separation, not only in terms of the actual user, but in terms of the content that they can see, as well as the data that is being represented for these different companies or these different users. Now, one of the key challenges that sometimes a SaaS provider can face is that whenever a customer comes to them and says, "Hey, I would like to add, new sets of users. I would like to perhaps manage my project, the file content in there, give external users access to the service," and most of the time they have to go back to that SaaS provider and have them set up those credentials and go in and give access for the application. But with Dundas BI, there is a built-in tenant administrator role where you can select someone from one of these tenants or customers, and as a tenant administrator, they have access to all the various different projects that is localized to a specific tenant, but they can also gain access to, let's say, the list of users that have been allocated or made available to access the content for this tenant or company. So as a tenant administrator here called tenant number 2, I can go in to add additional users into our application to provide them access, thereby reducing the amount of workload that a SaaS provider might have to do to set these things up. Similarly, for the different accounts, the users that I add to the application, I can go in and, let's say, customize what type of application privileges or what are some of the functionalities they should be able to access within the application without having to, let's say, rely on my SaaS provider. Now, at this point, we've seen some of the different views, different companies, the different tenants can gain to a shared dashboard or content within our application, as well as some of the different administrative capabilities for this tenant. But as a SaaS provider, what are some of the options that's available for me if I'm trying to set up a solution where the dashboards are shared across various different tenants? So this is where we have a screen showing a user who's logged in as an administrator from the SaaS provider's perspective, where I can see a list of tenants that has been made available. And even if I wanted to add a user manually, or let's say I'm onboarding a new client where I've set up their tenancy as one of this option, and we can call them, let's say, tenant B, I can always go into the application and add a new account or a new user to have them set up within our application. And you can see here that I can have this user associated to one of the various different tenants that's available, and we will start inheriting their privileges, their security settings, and setups for the dashboards or report that a particular user that belongs to a tenant should have access to. So if we go back to that SaaS or multi-tenancy module in the application and we pull up one of these tenants as an option to see what are some of the customizations we can do for this tenant, you'll notice that we have the ability to allocate how we choose to sort of share out a pool of licenses that we might have across various different tenants. And this goes back to the point that Wayne brought up, where if you're setting up an embedded analytic solution, how do you quickly move around privileges or functionalities that users can gain access to within the application? So here you can have various types of users, like a standard user who might gain access to a basic package, allowed to access standard dashboards and consume data, but you can also have a secondary tier like a power user where they can gain access to more premium offerings, do their own self-serve analytics within the application. So with our multi-tenancy module and the ability to reallocate licenses, as you see, you can basically monetize your solution by allocating those specific type of seats or licenses on a per tenant basis. Now, the other thing you can do within our multi-tenancy module, especially when you're targeting various different clients or users, is as a SaaS provider, I might have certain ways on how on a database perspective, I'm creating these segregations via different users. One example could be within a single large database, I might have a unique identifier that differentiates tenant 1 and tenant 2, or client A and client B. In a more aggressive scenario, you might, for security purposes, you might choose to create different instances of a database, perhaps with a same schema, where one database is for tenant A or client 1, and one database is for tenant number 2. With Dundas BI, we provide you the ability to add data connector overrides out of the box, so you can dynamically even switch between one database to another database of the same schema with our multi-tenancy module if you're not using a role-based security to identify, or let's say distinguish between the different types of clients that you have within your database. So an example of how this is achieved in our application is shown in this tab here. So you can see here we have a visualization where you have an English user coming in or logged on into the application with a single shared dashboard. They can see the data or the content in an English version. Similarly, if I was, say, a customer that came from France and I wanted to see my dashboard with my data in a different language localized to the data sets that I'm interested in, we can also achieve that within a single shared dashboard. So let me go or sort of log out of the application and log back in as a French user here. And you can see with the same link, the same dashboard, it's customized for a French version or a French company in here. Now, up to this point, a lot of the customization and managing of tenants, creating them, is done directly within Dundas BI. However, in some scenarios, as a SaaS provider, I might already have some of these mappings available for me. So for example, I might already have a database or a table that points to all the various different customers I have and what tenancy they belong to. And if I wanted to have an embedded analytics product that integrates with my existing data set or user management system, Dundas allows you to create what's known as a custom tenants provider, that, whereby you can integrate your existing system and those mappings for those tenants directly into our application. So instead of managing the list of tenants and their privileges and what tiers are available within the application, you can actually use the custom tenants provider to have that integrated with any of the work that you may have already done from a tenant's perspective up to this point. So that's one of the flexibility that is provided within the application for scaling these dashboards and integrating your solution into a multi-tenant environment. Now, for the last piece we want to look at is going to be covering some of the extensibility and customizations for the dashboards and reports that you're creating as part of embedded analytics. So we have a few examples that covers these scenarios. So the first one here is going to take a look at how we can use a script. Actually, I need to log off and log back in there again. Different user, different privileges. Okay, so let's pull up that view again. Right, so what you have here is a pie chart with the aid of some scripts. I've customized it where I can rotate this pie chart with the click of my mouse. And you can see here for some of these sections, my labels are not visible. So I can say that perhaps I want to start rotating this visualization so that I can see some of the labels or the percentages more clearly. And this is actually achieved in Dundas using some scripts that you can add to customize the visualizations. Another more involved example of how you can customize the visualizations and how you can work with the data visualizations differently is in this dashboard we are choosing to filter some of the data sets we're seeing with the bar chart and the line chart here via a drag and drop experience, as you can see here, rather than perhaps choosing to filter out the data set using a drop-down filter such as this. So again, this is another type of a customization that you can do within our application when it comes to, let's say, various different data visualizations. But the customization and the extensibility doesn't stop only at that point, but you can also customize even the sort of overall dashboard or user experience for your end users. So over here, you can see we have the side menu or main menu in Dundas BI where I can expand, and it pretty much shows me what some of these icons mean. However, if we close that up back again and I click on this icon via some neat scripting, I've actually modified the user interface of my application so that now when I expand this, I have various different options or links that I can click on. So for example, if we click on sales, you can see it's going to navigate me to a sales dashboard here. So very easily and quickly, with some scripts, I can customize not only the data visualizations, but also the user interfaces that are made available for me on a dashboard. And that customization doesn't stop there. So for example, here we have a use case scenario where I have used some of the APIs that were made available or exposed in our application to create a custom data transform to work with our ETL layer. So you can see the grayed out option here in the center with the Google Maps transform. And basically what this transform does is, given a couple of inputs, it tries to calculate the distance between various different locations. And we can see an example of where this transform has been made use of in this dashboard that I'm pulling up here. So you can see that using the Google transform data transform there, I have created a dashboard where I can calculate the distance from a location that is given here to various different warehouses. And not only have I customized, extended Dundas BI and looked at examples of how we can take Dundas BI and embed it into other applications, but here with the Google Maps, you also see an example of how you can take other third-party tools or application and embed that within Dundas BI as well. So in this example, if I was to say what is the route that I'm going to need to take between one Blue Jays and perhaps a fictitious Microsoft location, you can see that my Google Maps is going to plot out that option for me. Of course, I can click on something like more options to pull up the Google Maps navigation for that dashboard that I was basically looking at a while ago. Now, obviously, these are just a few, sort of the tip of the iceberg in terms of some of the different customizations and extensibility options that you have available as part of an embedded analytics. If you take a look at our support site, particularly under developers resources, you can see that we have a well-documented list of all of the different types of APIs that's available, whether it be .NET, REST, or JavaScript API, and you also have access to various different samples for some of these customizations, or even our script libraries, which show you some of the cool and neat or unique ways you can work with our application. So here I'm just sort of pulling up a quick example for everyone to see where we're using a D3 library here to create a funnel chart within our application. All right, so with that, it covers some of the various different types of customizations, flexibility that you can use Dundas BI for when it comes to embedding, scaling it, and making it available as a multi-tenant solution, as well as the extensibility and customization options. Sorry, I think my mic may have been muted at a point there. Yeah, sorry. Apparently, I had audio issues as well. Okay, so let me quickly recap on where I left off. Basically, we're talking about next steps and the Jumpstart program in Dundas BI to help you get to the market a lot faster with the right solution, as well as some of the benefits that are made available as part of the Jumpstart program. So includes, 8 hours of training, help with the POC if you're trying to take a look at how you can do embedded analytics within Dundas BI, as well as access to our support staff, the experts here for some ad hoc consulting, as well as our development team at Dundas. And for more information about the Jumpstart package, please visit the link at the bottom of this page, or you can send further questions to info@dundas.com. Now, at this point, I'd like to open up the floor to any questions. If you haven't sent your questions to the questions panel on GoToWebinar, please do so, and we'll start answering some of those questions. So Wayne, if you don't mind, I have a question for you. Building an embedded solution which is client-facing seems to require more effort than building a solution for internal usage, where, say, an organization can take more of a compromise on what the outcome is if it's not external or integral to the organization's offering. In that scenario, how does it change the evaluation process of a BI platform?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in two ways. The styling has to be much more exact, I think, because money's on the line in a commercial environment. So the styling, the integration will need to be tighter. I mean, it really needs to look like one product, even though it's two. The other issue is multi-tenancy is a big one in the commercial environment. Tenants need both isolation and the ability to configure their own environments with selective permissioning, giving different users access to different analytical functionality, as well as different views of data within the tenant and between the tenants. So those are two things or three things really to look at from a commercial perspective that are going to be slightly different from an enterprise perspective. I will say, though, that a lot of enterprises now are starting to use embedded analytics externally with customers. So credit card companies, financial services companies in particular, are starting to develop very robust, what we used to call extranet analytics capabilities, providing portals where customers can come in and check their activity, check their portfolios, and increasingly those types of applications, customer-facing applications, have embedded analytics in them. So even though companies may not charge for them, it's very critical to maintaining their customer satisfaction and loyalty.
All right, thank you very much for that, Wayne. We have another question here about one of the examples that was shown earlier. I believe this was specifically targeting the multi-tenancy option. So let me go ahead and quickly pull up that example. And the question was pertaining to tenant 1 and the view for tenant 2. Was that two various different dashboards that were being shown for tenant 1 and tenant 2? The answer to that is no. In this use case scenario, it was the same dashboard, and that's the beauty of multi-tenancy in Dundas BI. You can have a shared dashboard that loads with dynamic themes and customized data set that's already been filtered on a user level, already having that data security piece integrated into there. However, the application also gives you the flexibility to create dashboards and reports that are custom to specific tenants. So if you do not have content that overlaps between the various different tenants, you can have them localized to the individual tenants, to the individual companies, or you can have a shared dashboard such as this without having to duplicate or copy over, let's say, some of the work that you're doing for one customer to another customer. Well, I think we have time for one last question, Wayne. And this one is, I guess, directed to you as well. So many organizations with embedded analytics as a means to better serve their customer, what is, at no additional cost, what is the sort of recommended threshold here for organizations to start charging their customers for analytical capabilities?
Well, it all comes back to their strategy and what they're trying to accomplish. Are they trying to sweeten their value of their existing product? Excuse me. Without nickel and diming them, or what might appear to be nickel and diming them by charging for new features. So that's one strategy. It could be that they're in a competitive market and need to catch up with the competitors. So if the competitor, they may mimic what their competitors are doing, whether they're charging or not. Or if you think that you're going to provide a lot of additional value by offering analytics and users are willing to pay for it, then a lot of companies will decide it's worth the effort to price analytics separately. So it all depends on the strategy that they're trying to accomplish. And that's why it's so important up front to know what you're getting into and why you're doing it, because it will be very important to make critical decisions like these down the road.
Right. Thank you very much for that, Wayne. So it seems that we've almost run out of time for questions here. For the rest of the audience who have further questions that they would like to have answered, feel free to send out an email to info@dundas.com, and we will reach out to you with an answer for those questions. Wayne, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today, and thank you very much for the attendees and the audience for showing up today as well. Hopefully you found the webinar on how, or sort of the ultimate guide on selecting an embedded analytics product useful. Thank you very much, and have a good day. Thank you, Wayne.
You're welcome, Ash. My pleasure.